When you give yourself permission to explore your identity, you will start to realize that being an athlete is an important part of who you are, but it is not all that you are. When you develop other areas of your identity, it can sometimes open up your performance in ways that were never available to you before.
Welcome to the Injured Athletes Club podcast, the show that helps athletes cope with sports injuries and bounce back stronger. I'm journalist Cindy Kozma.
And I'm mental skills coach Carrie Jackson. We're sorry you're here, but we're glad you're with us.
This week, it's just Coach Carrie and I, and we're going to talk about a topic that comes up a lot here in the Injured Athletes Club, and that's identity. But before we get into the episode, we wanted to share one other key resource with you. If you are listening to Coach Carrie today and you're thinking, gosh, I'd really love a little bit more guidance from her along the way in my rehab and recovery, we have just the thing for you. If you go to our website, injuredathletesclub.com, and click on the tab that says More Resources, you will find a link to a page that will offer a number of different resources. And the one we want to highlight today is called the Mental Rehab Intro to Mental Training for Injured Athletes e-course. And basically what this is Coach Carrie walking you through a 5-lesson e-course all about the ins and outs of the injury process and all of the things like struggles with identity that you're likely to encounter along the way. And just even more great advice on overcoming those issues and really bouncing back as strong as you possibly can, just like you're going to hear today. Go to our website, injuredathletesclub.com, click on More Resources, and check out the Mental Rehab Intro to Mental Training for Injured Athletes e-course.
We also want to give a very big shout out and thank you to our exclusive sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. They're the creators of the Lever System, an innovative way to reduce your body weight while exercising on a treadmill.
That's right. And you are going to hear more about that later in this episode. But for now, we're going to talk identity. We're going to share a lot more today about what it means to have a strong athletic identity, what happens to your identity when you're injured, and how all this factors in to your recovery and the rest of your life. And this is one of those that comes up over and over again on the podcast, in the support group on Facebook, and we write about it a lot in our book, Rebound. So again, Coach Carrie, I'd imagine this comes up a lot when you're working one-on-one or in a group with injured athletes, but I don't want to put words in your mouth. So share if this is indeed a topic that you discuss frequently.
Yes, it's definitely a topic that comes up a lot, both in my group coaching and my one-on-one coaching. And I think anytime we talk about it, like on the show, or I'm talking about it in the groups or with my individual athletes, you feel this. Like if you're an injured athlete right now and you're listening to this episode, you're going to feel this when we're talking about it, because it's definitely something that's impactful. And, this is one of the reasons, this whole idea of identity, it's one of the reasons why sometimes people equate the experience of being an injured athlete with the stages of grief. And when you're injured, you're experiencing a loss. So, and for some, it's not just a loss of participating in their sport, but it feels like a loss of who you are and how you show up in the world.
Right. So this kind of follows from that. I mean, what does it mean exactly to have a strong athletic identity?
Yeah, when you have a strong athletic identity, it means that your sport and your athletic life are one of your bigger buckets, so to speak. So one way to think about it is like we all have labels. And these labels are like descriptions of how we are identified in the world. And labels will describe sort of where people can put us, so to speak, in the categories of their minds. So and the reason for this is your brain organizes information by putting things into categories. It's how your brain quickly gathers information and makes sense of the world around you. And these labels are a way for us to sort of categorize ourselves, and they define what's true about us and what isn't true, and where we fit and where we don't. And you'll have labels that describe your attributes, like I'm kind, I'm smart, I'm loyal, I'm glass half full or glass half empty, those types of things. And then you also have labels that describe the various roles you have in your life, like I am a spouse, I am a parent, I am an engineer, I am an athlete. And these labels shape your identity. They shape your beliefs. They shape the goals you choose to go after. you change your behavior to fit the mold of the label, and it becomes part of your identity. And, how does that type of person think and act and behave? And so when your sport is something you are passionate about and you've dedicated time and energy and resources to it, it can feel like it's not just something you do, but it's also who you are. And when you feel like your sport is part of who you are, that means you have a strong athletic identity.
So it's not entirely clear to me from that description, is having a strong athletic identity a good thing or a bad thing for your performance, your injury recovery, and kind of your overall well-being as a human?
Yeah, that's a great question. The answer is yes, meaning it's both. So having a strong athletic identity in and of itself isn't necessarily a good or bad thing. It's whether your feelings of self-worth are also tied up in that identity. So if your athletic identity is threatened, you're going to want to protect it, especially if it's the big bucket, right? If it's like one of your sole sort of sources of identity. So when you have a high athletic identity, you might strive to work really hard towards your athletic goals because that identity is meaningful to you. It means those goals are important to you and you're willing to put off immediate gratification for that big reward that comes later. You'll put, the work in that's necessary to make it happen. However, if that high athletic identity is your sole identity, a lot of your self-worth is going to be tied up into a single identity. And in this case, that identity is being an athlete. So a lot of your self-worth is wrapped up in being an athlete. And when you're injured, all of a sudden, it feels like you're not an athlete anymore. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But if you have a high athletic identity and a lot of your self-worth is wrapped up into it, right? When something threatens that identity, whether it's losing your starting position or making a mistake, there's other things that will threaten it too, but also getting injured. When that happens, it can feel devastating. And so there are ways that having a strong identity can serve you really well. And there's also ways that it can be detrimental.
So a bit of a double-edged sword.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's explore that a little bit more. What can happen to your athletic identity and your overall identity when you get hurt?
Yeah. There's so many losses that come with being injured, as all of you listening know. Mm-hmm. Like there's the loss of, being able to use your body the way you're used to, the loss of your social outlet, the loss of your stress outlet, the loss of your fitness. But one of the biggest losses is the loss of the label, right? The loss of your athletic identity. You feel like you're not able to participate in your sport. Like when you feel like that, when something threatens it, right? And there's something that's like suddenly you're not able to do the thing that you love. You're not able to participate in your sport. You feel like you no longer have the label of athlete and you start to question who you are. So that's how it can impact sort of your identity overall. You start to question who you are and what's important if you can't do the thing that you love.
Right. And I feel like you started getting at this answer to this next question a little bit there, just that sense of, oh my gosh, who am I? But how do athletes kind of know if this is happening to them? Like, how do you know this is negatively affecting you? Like, what does it kind of feel like? And how do athletes describe the emotions surrounding this loss of identity?
Yeah, it feels very, there's a lot, we often talk about the emotional roller coaster of being an injured athlete. And so with this one in particular, it can, it can feel very stressful and confusing and very unmooring. Those are kind of the biggest pieces, I think, with that. There's so many other emotions that come with it, but those in particular with this idea of like, how do you know that you're coping with the loss of identity? It's that like, you're just soul crushed and upset and confused and feel unmoored. And, athletes may feel like, I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know who I am anymore if I can't do the sport that I love. Like, who am I if I'm not Carrie, the athlete, And this could be true for any strong identity. For some people, it might be a different part of themselves that would feel threatened in this way. But when it's the athlete identity, and knowing whether or not you're struggling with this, like you might tend to focus on all the things you can't do, or you might try to force yourself back sooner than your body's ready. You might be experiencing feelings of anger or just overall having a difficult time accepting your injury.
Yeah, I have definitely, I'm like,
Been there.
Been there. And we see it all the time in the group too. And I definitely feel a lot of people helping each other through this and expressing this in the Facebook group and everywhere else we encounter injured athletes. So Coach Carrie, how do you work with people on this? What are some ways to deal with those difficult feelings when you're in the middle of them?
Yes. So when you're in the middle of feeling that distress and you're in the middle of feeling those feelings, the biggest thing to remember is that the way you're feeling right now in this moment is not how you will always feel. And that's one of my personal mantras that I use often when I'm hooked by, whether it's injury or anything in life, right? Because there's going to be other distressing emotions that we feel. Anytime I'm in that space and I really am feeling hooked, I have to remind myself, and I do with that mantra of like, how you're feeling right now is not how you will always feel. You will be okay. So reminding yourself of that is really critical. The other thing that's important to do is to allow yourself to feel your difficult feelings instead of shoving them down and moving away from them. So I think our desire to avoid discomfort at all costs ends up prolonging the discomfort. When you're experiencing distress, labeling your emotions, or what we call affect labeling, decreases the activity in the amygdala, which reduces stress as well as reduces that physiological arousal that comes with anxiety. So just the act of labeling your emotions in the moment that you're feeling them, allowing yourself to feel them, especially the difficult emotions, like that's a skill. And it turns out we're not good at that skill. It turns out we're not really great at accurately labeling the emotions. And part of that is because of what I was describing before, like the brain wanting to categorize information. So we often just dump them into the categories of like, this emotion feels good and this emotion feels bad versus this emotion is trying to tell me something and I need to give it space to tell me. And oftentimes we don't do that. So this is a skill that takes practice, but those two, like in the moment when you're feeling it, those two things are really, really critical.
So if you've been listening along and you're kind of like, yes, kind of how I was a minute ago, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe even just listening to this and identifying that this is part of your issue could be really helpful. I know also, and we'll link to this in the show notes, we have a whole episode on one of your drills for feeling your feelings, the Go Far technique. And we have an exercise in the book called the Emotion Decoder too. We'll link to some of those worksheets in the show notes as well that can also really help pinpoint exactly what it is you're feeling. So just a few extra resources for you there. And, we do have an exercise in Rebound, and it's on page 183 to be exact, called Balance the Wheel, that I think is really particularly helpful for this kind of emotional struggle with identity. Maybe once you're through like the very worst initial feelings, you've kind of labeled it, this is what I'm dealing with. This might be a way to kind of make some changes that address that. But I'm saying this, but Coach Carrie, you're the expert. So can you talk a little bit about this exercise if you think it's appropriate in this situation and kind of how it helps?
I do think it's appropriate. It's interesting how, like when I'm doing the rebound coaching program for the group, the group coaching for injured athletes or my individual athletes, one of the things that they'll discover sometimes as after being injured is realizing like, oh my gosh, I haven't really developed other parts of my identity. And I don't really know what I even like to do outside of my sport. And they'll realize too, like, I don't think I really have any other coping skills other than my sport, which was my stress outlet and being in my body. So it's really eye-opening, but that's the unmooring part, like, or just sometimes in an unsettling way of like, oh my God, I didn't even know I didn't have these things until I became injured. And so Balance the Wheel is a nice way to just start exploring other parts of your identity. And I do that using the analogy of a bike wheel. So when you're riding a bike, you want your bike wheels to roll straight. And we call that true. Like you want your wheels to be true. And if your wheel isn't true, then you're going to have wheel wobble. And for your wheel to be true, there needs to be equal tension on every single spoke. So if there's any spoke that has more or less tension than the others, your wheel is going to be out of balance and you're going to have wheel wobble. And so I sort of applied this concept in this to what you're experiencing right now of that loss of identity. So if you've been putting all your energy, aka tension, into your sport and leaving the rest of your identity spokes loose, so to speak, you're going to experience some life wobble, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we want to true that up. And this is a great exercise to do that. So you need to make sure that you're putting energy into other things that you love, into other parts of your identity in order to create equal tension and balance the wheel. So the balance the wheel mental training drill is a series of questions that you can answer that give you some clues about where you might start in order to create some of that balance and some better balance. And it sort of each question explores the what and the how. So I'll give you the 4 main questions. And if you head to injuredathletesclub.com and sign up for our newsletter, you can download a free workbook that includes this worksheet and a bunch of other amazing worksheets that go along with the book. But it has this balance your wheel worksheet in it. So the questions are, who are 3 people in your life you would like to connect with more? And then after each question, it gets to the how. It'll ask another question of like, okay, so, what's the next step, basically? So you're not only are you answering these questions and identifying the what, then you're taking the next step of like, okay, how do I make this happen? So who are 3 people in your life you would like to connect with more? What are 3 daily hassles you currently face? What are 3 things that make you feel energized when you do them? And what are 3 new activities or pursuits you are interested in trying? Right. So another one, if I did it over, another one I might add on there is just asking yourself, like, are there any hobbies that I have that I used to do that I really enjoyed that maybe I could bring back into the mix? And a lot of my injured athletes will do that. And it's really interesting, the things that they get reconnected to and are really appreciative of that. So that's just it's a great tool to get you started.
And I feel like there's so many examples we've had in even in just this season of the Injured Athletes Club podcast, guests talking about kind of working through some of these things. Like I'm thinking about Millie Palladino, the runner who talked about kind of going back to graduate school, reconnecting with her interests in architecture and design and urban planning. And Savannah Coleman too, who talked about realizing that soccer was really her main coping mechanism, and she really had to work to develop some other skills and interests and realize who she was as a person. And we'll link to those episodes in the show notes if you didn't listen to them already. I think both of them illustrate that it's not an easy process, but the benefits can be so overwhelmingly positive for you, not just as an athlete, but as a person when you do this work. So hopefully, that I love that we have like a little how-to guide and also some examples of athletes who have gone through this and really reconnected with something, like you said, something that they had let fall dormant or something new to them, or just really worked on that mission of self-discovery.
Athletes, we know you're always looking for new ways to get back to training and to prevent the next injury. We want to introduce you to a great new tool from our sponsor for this season, Lever Movement. The Lever system is an innovative way to reduce your body weight while exercising on a treadmill, which means less impact on your joints. This is perfect for coming back from an injury, or if you're healthy now, to push your limits without fear holding you back. Whether you're returning to running, looking to increase your running volume, or wanting to add some serious speed work to your routine, Lever has got you covered.
And what's even better? The Lever system is incredibly portable. It sets up on your home treadmill or at your local gym in under 2 minutes. Yes, you heard that right. Less than 2 minutes and you are ready to go. You may have seen elite athletes like Eilish McColgan and Kara Goucher using it. And now we've got an exclusive deal for you here at the Injured Athletes Club. Use the discount code TIAC20 to get 20% off your purchase. Trust me, your joints, Achilles, and sore muscles will thank you, and so will your future self.
Check out Lever today and take your training to the next level. Also, give them a follow on Instagram at Lever Movement and learn more about their products and their connection to the running community.
We've often called the Injured Athletes Club the best club you never want to join. Well, did you know that you can now pick up shirts, hats, journals, stickers, and more to show your solidarity and empower yourself on your recovery journey? That's right, we have merchandise. Some of it features our fantastic updated Injured Athletes Club logo, designed and then redesigned by the talented Emma Coomer. And then there are plenty of products with Coach Carrie-isms on them too. Sayings like,
stronger every day, obstacles to opportunities, and the all-time favorite, recovery is now my sport. You can head to injuredathletesclub.com/shop to browse everything that's available. Pick up something for yourself as a special treat, or you can buy your favorite injured athlete a gift. We also sell gift cards. And when you purchase, you're supporting this show and all our work for injured athletes. Don't forget, injuredathletesclub.com/shop and pick up your Injured Athletes Club merch today.
That said, I know that some athletes may feel resistance to expanding some identity beyond simply the athletic. Again, not speaking from experience at all here. Something that I think we hear from people too is like, it almost feels like giving up if you start to pay attention to other parts of your life. So what is your response when you hear that from athletes?
I have a few different responses that come to mind, but because sometimes I hear from coaches too, and that used to be a pretty pervasive thought. It was like, coaches not wanting their athletes to think about life after sports or like other things that they would want to do, because the perception was that somehow you were going to have less focus for your sport or not perform as well. And what we find is actually the opposite. So this idea of resistance just in general, I think is important to touch on. Like when you are feeling resistance about anything in life, it means you're experiencing some kind of internal pushback, and you need to figure out where that pushback is coming from. So sometimes resistance is telling you that something feels uncomfortable and you need to set a boundary. But other times the feeling is letting you know you are avoiding discomfort, but this is exactly what you need to do, right? So sometimes when you feel that resistance, it is a message that like, so this isn't resonating right now. But other times, and this is you kind of do your gut check. Like sometimes the resistance is because I know I need to face this thing and I'm scared too. So it's another sort of messenger that we need to pay attention to and find out what's it actually telling me. So resistance is sending a message and you have to decipher what that message is. This is the part that's challenged that all humans kind of struggle with, I think, as we get really entrenched in our identity, when really your identity is meant to be fluid. It's meant to change over time as we get older, as we gain more experiences. What was once the most important thing to you might not be the most important thing to you right now. So if I think about what was the most important thing to me when I was 10 or 11, it's not going to be the most important thing then it was probably selling Girl Scout cookies. That's not the most important thing to me right now. Maybe if I had a kid that was selling them, but I don't. The most important thing is finding where I could buy them and eat them. It's changed. So.
You've evolved.
Yeah, exactly. But even 10 years ago, what was the most important thing might not be. And so, or even a year ago, but it's confusing when that happens because we put a lot of stock into who we are in any given moment. And in general, humans don't like change. If we don't really work with it, it feels like more of a threat or just we don't like the unknown. And so just knowing, kind of accepting whatever the feelings are that come, I feel like this is such a huge piece of being a human, and the biggest life skill we could learn is just how do I move into whatever the emotion is and let myself feel it and let myself hear the message. And so I can use it in a way that's actually productive. Because oftentimes we're just I don't want to feel that. It doesn't feel good. So I'm going to move away. So resistance, oftentimes we just move away. So it can be really confusing when you've had a part of your identity that was a significant part of your life for so many years now being called into question. And sometimes that scares us, or sometimes we're being stubborn, and just don't want it to be different.
Yeah, that sounds right. And I think back to, when I was 10 or 11, I rode horses, and I swore to myself that I would not be that person who grew out of that, and I would do it for the rest of my life. And spoiler, I'm not an equestrian athlete. So we've had some of them on the show, and I highly respect them. But it's so true when you think about it that way, that we do grow and change. And so I think that makes so much sense and really helps with the perspective on this. Another thing that is kind of, I think about when I think about this, that makes it a little more complicated, is that one of the things that we talk about in Rebound and frequently in the Injured Athletes Club is that you can kind of apply your athletic skills and identity to your recovery. So in that way, it almost seems like there are ways in which an athletic identity can be beneficial to your rehab and recovery. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that and how that kind of factors into this equation.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I'll say to my one-on-one coaching clients often is that sometimes our greatest strength is also our greatest challenge. And it's our job to kind of figure out, how do we use this in a way that is beneficial and understand when it tips over into the part that's detrimental. And that's kind of like what we're talking about with that athletic identity. And there's absolutely ways that, it can be sort of channeled in a way that's beneficial. And this is really where the phrase recovery is now your sport kind of comes in and comes from I think the reason that idea of your recovery is now your sport resonates with injured athletes is because it gives them a way to stay connected to their athletic identity. Being an athlete means you also have an athletic mindset. And sometimes that mindset can serve you very well in your injury. Sometimes it gets in the way, but it also can serve you really well because you know what it means to work hard. You know what it means to have discipline. And now that athletic mindset needs to be directed towards your recovery.
Yeah, makes sense. I know another big time this identity comes up is when a pro or elite athlete retires or an athlete at any level moves on from their sport, kind of like I moved on from horseback riding.
Yeah.
Whether it's due to injury, age, or other circumstances. How do you guide athletes through that transition?
Yeah. Part of how I help guide athletes through the transition is by having the conversation. It's an inevitability, right? That at some point this is coming, and yet many people avoid thinking about it. So I provide a safe space for them to talk about it with no agenda. And that piece is critical, that idea of no agenda, because it's an important piece because during this time, it can be very confusing for the athlete. And when you try to have conversations with other people in your life about it, sometimes those people have their own opinions about whether they think you should retire or not retire. And you're still in a space of trying to figure that out. And so then getting other people's opinions can feel very overwhelming. And you need the opportunity to talk about it without worrying whether the person you're talking to has their own agenda. So the biggest factor with this transition is just to know that it takes time. I think there's sometimes you might compare yourself to someone else and you see someone else retire and it looks on the surface like, oh, it just happened overnight. And that is not how it happens. For the most part, that's not how it happens at all. There's a negotiation happening inside of you as you try to redefine your relationship with your sport. It can be a very confusing time with a lot of back and forth, especially if you haven't developed other parts of your identity. So I help them think about and explore who they are outside of their sport without any judgment, without any agenda, and just let them start to talk this through because it's such a key important part of the transition.
Yeah. And talking about that kind of safe space and also someone trained in the skills used to navigate these situations. I mean, as we talk about this and I think about it, it seems like an area that could truly be destabilizing and one where talking with a mental skills coach or mental health professional could be especially beneficial. I know you maybe are not the most objective source on this, but I wondered if you'd agree. And I also wondered when you think these issues of identity might transcend the mental skills domain and actually become something that would be best handled by someone trained on the clinical side.
Yeah, it isn't destabilizing for everyone, but it absolutely can be and can feel so overwhelming and affecting every area of your life. And the other thing that I find, first, if this resonates with anyone or this applies to you, for some people, it's particularly confusing if you've gone through an injury before and you didn't feel destabilized and this time you do. So a mental skills coach like myself can help with resilience and confidence through the process and with performance enhancement specific to your injury recovery and coming back into your sport, or even transitioning out. But there are times when you may need more clinical support than performance enhancement support. So if you are obsessively reliving the events of your injury over and over, if you're withdrawing from people in your life, if you're experiencing feelings of hopelessness, if you're using alcohol or other drugs to self-medicate, or having thoughts of hurting yourself or death, dying or going away, you absolutely want to look into getting some clinical support. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It doesn't mean that you are broken. It does not mean that you are weak. It means that you are going through a traumatic experience. And nobody else gets to define whether or not this experience is traumatic for you. So if you're feeling any of those feelings, absolutely reach out for support. And you can head over to a great resource is the Association for Applied Sport Psychology, which is ASP, AASP. You can head over there and they have a directory, a CMPC directory, where you can find a certified mental performance consultant. So someone that is qualified and gets it, right? That understands that you are struggling with your athletic identity, because not everybody necessarily understands that part. And it's not a fault. Like, it's just this is a field of study. So sometimes I'll have athletes come to me that are injured, that they have a wonderful therapist, an incredible therapist, and they want to continue to work with them, but they feel like they don't quite get this. They don't quite get the impact. And so they work with me for a period of time to get some skills and then bring those back to their therapist, and they work through things together. So it's sometimes you just need that specialized support, and the CMPC directory is a great place to find that.
And of course, we'll link to that in the show notes. And I think it's great to mention too that there are, people who are like you and are mental skills coaches, and there are also clinical psychologists, et cetera, who are CMPCs. So there are people who would be qualified to handle those deeper, tougher clinical issues, but also have that training in the athletic mindset too. So those would be great people to look for in that situation. And I would be remiss too to not say that if you are feeling these really difficult, overwhelming feelings right now, you can also dial 988, yes, which is mental health helpline, support line, always in the moment support available to you there if you need it. And you should not, as Coach Carrie said, hesitate to reach out for that when you need it. It's there for you.
Absolutely. So, yeah.
Yeah. Like so many things. And I feel like we've kind of touched on this here, how grappling with these things can help you kind of after you're through the injury recovery process. But let's talk about that specifically. How can grappling with questions of identity during the injury process ultimately benefit an athlete once they're back to their sport, and even just in the rest of their lives?
Yeah. When you give yourself permission to explore your identity, you will start to realize that being an athlete is an important part of who you are, but it is not all that you are. When you develop other areas of your identity, it can sometimes open up your performance in ways that were never available to you before. And I think it's just such a mindset flip on that. Mm. Like, I think that, in our culture, in sports culture, it's just like the harder I work and the more focused I am, the better I'm going to be. But that's not always the case. And I'll tell you why. So, when all of your self-worth is wrapped up in your athletic identity, that is something you are going to want to protect at all costs. And sometimes the cost is actually to your performance. That means that you're not willing to take the risks necessary to find out what you are truly capable of, because that you're just so desperately trying to protect that fear of failure. And so injury, it's not the only experience that's going to challenge your identity. We don't get to know, unfortunately, there's no magic 8-ball, right? Like, we don't get to know what challenges the universe has in store for us, but we can pretty much guarantee that there will be challenges. So, doing your own values inventory, assessing the balance of your wheel and tightening up spokes every once in a while is a proactive way to keep yourself in balance. And I think you may be surprised to find it doesn't make your performance worse. It makes it better. It doesn't mean that you're saying that your sport is any less important to you. It's just other things are also important to you.
Well, thank you for that, Coach Carrie. I think that is a really empowering note to end on. It's, encouraging for people who are in the middle of this to know that there is hope in all the ways on the other side of this. And I am, again, this topic comes up again and again, and I am so grateful to you for addressing it, and so hopeful that this will be beneficial for our listeners out there to hear. So thank you, Coach Carrie, and thanks to all of you for listening. Thanks also to our sponsor, Lever Movement, for making the show possible, and to Jeremy Nussel for editing this and every single episode of the Injured Athletes Club since way back in season 1. We're grateful for all you do, Jeremy, and we hope that audio expert extraordinaire is a major part of your identity, because that's what you do for us. As we mentioned in the intro, there are a lot of other great resources, including that mental training rehab e-course. There's links to that on our website, injuredathletesclub.com. If you click on more resources, you'll find that and a lot of other tools to guide you through this rehab process. You can listen to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Music, Audible, just about anywhere you pod. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us a rating or a review, we would really appreciate it. That helps other athletes find the show. Finally, between episodes, you can join our Facebook group, which is also called the Injured Athletes Club. There, you can find support and advice from other people who just get it, because they are there right now or they've been there before, and they can definitely relate to your struggles with identity and everything else that goes along with this roller coaster. Again, you can get links to all of that on our website, injuredathletesclub.com. Thanks, and we'll see you there.